This presentation focuses on how meaningful human connection relates to cognition. Specifically, it looks at two different sides of social connection. The first article studies what happens immediately after social exclusion, focusing on working memory in adolescence. The second article looks at longer-term social disconnection, focusing on loneliness, social isolation, and memory across 6 years in middle-aged and older adults. The larger question is not just whether relationships matter emotionally, but whether feeling included, connected, or disconnected can also relate to how people think, remember, and hold information in the mind. The two articles are connected by one main idea. Social experiences can create cognitive consequences. The first study is more immediate and a bit experimental. It asks whether a brief experience of being socially excluded can affect working memory right afterward. The second study is longer term and observational. It asks whether loneliness, social isolation, or having both is connected to memory across 6 years. Together, they help answer a broader cognition question. Human connection is not only important for well-being, but may also connect to other cognitive resources people use to focus, learn, and remember. Furman and colleagues were not only asking whether exclusion feels bad. That part is already expected. Their more specific question was whether a brief social exclusion experience could affect a working memory performance. This matters because adolescence is often described as a sensitive period for social development. During this period, peer relationships and belonging becomes especially important, so exclusion may use up emotional or attentional resources. Their hypothesis was that exclusion would reduce working memory, especially for adolescents. In cognitive terms, working memory is the ability to hold information in the mind and work with it, such as remembering instructions while completing a task. The method is useful for this assignment because the conditions are clear. Participants were female and were divided into young adolescents, mid-adolescents, and adults. They completed Cyberball, which is a virtual ball tossing game. In the inclusion condition, the participants keeps receiving the ball. In the exclusion condition, the other players stop throwing the ball to her. Afterward, the researchers measured mood and working memory. The important comparison is not just excluded versus included. It is whether the exclusion affected the age groups differently. The mood-dependent measures were mood, verbal working memory, and visual spatial working memory. These measures connected directly to cognition since they test the ability to keep information active and update it while doing the task. On the horizontal axis, there are 3 age groups: young adolescents, mid-adolescents, and adults. The vertical direction represents the degree to which verbal working memory was lower after exclusion. The main pattern to notice is a taller bar for young adolescents. All age groups felt worse after exclusion, so the mood manipulation worked broadly. However, the cognitive effect was not broad. Young adolescents girls showed reduced verbal working memory accuracy after exclusion, while mid-adolescents and adults did not show the same pattern. There was also no clear effect on visual spatial working memory in any age group, so the most accurate conclusion is specific. A brief exclusion experience affected verbal working memory for young adolescents girls, not cognition in every form or every age group. The authors interpreted the findings as evidence that exclusion may temporarily interfere with cognitive resources, especially during young adolescence. This makes sense because after exclusion, a person may be regulating emotion, thinking about why they were left out, or monitoring the social situation. Those processes compete with working memory. The results support the hypothesis in a very specific way. The effect appeared in verbal working memory for young adolescent girls, not every task or age group. A concern that in the sample included only girls and women, so it cannot automatically generalize to everyone. Also, Cyberball is useful experimentally, but is not the same as being excluded by real friends or classmates. Still, the study adds value because it connects a social experience to a measurable cognitive outcome. The first article focused on a short social experience. being included or excluded during a game, and then completing working memory tasks. The second article moves into a much longer time scale. Instead of looking at what happens minutes after exclusion, Kang and colleagues looked at social isolation and loneliness across 6 years. This is useful because meaningful human connection is not about one moment, but it's about ongoing structure and the quality of people's relationships. Kang and colleagues asked whether social isolation, loneliness, or having both related to memory in an aging population. A really important part of this article is that loneliness and social isolation are not treated as the same thing. Loneliness is subjective. It means feeling disconnected or dissatisfied with relationships, whereas social isolation is more structural, such as having fewer contacts or less participation. This distinction is important for this presentation because meaningful connection isn't only about how many people are around, but a person can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely, or have fewer contacts but still feel emotionally connected. The study used data from over 14,000 middle-aged and older adults in the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, followed across 6 years. The authors used naturally occurring comparison groups. Participants were categorized as neither lonely nor isolated, lonely only, socially isolated only, or both lonely and socially isolated. The memory outcome came from immediate and delayed verbal recall. That gives the article a direct cognition focus since the outcome is memory, not only quality of life or mood. The researchers followed participants across 3 waves over 6 years and used statistical models to examine how these social categories related to memory over time. The vertical direction on the graph represents a more negative memory pattern. The key comparison is on the right side of the slide. People who were both lonely and socially isolated showed the poorest memory pattern. People with only loneliness or social isolation showed disadvantages compared to those who had neither, but the combined group was the most concerning. A useful way to explain this is that loneliness captures the subjective emotional feeling of disconnection, while social isolation captures the structure of having less contact or participation. When both are present together, the association with memory appears strongest. Because this is observational, this should be described as an association, not proof that loneliness and isolation causes memory decline. When we put the 2 articles together, they suggest that connection can be studied at different levels. Furman and colleagues showed immediate effect after exclusion, specifically on verbal working memory in young adolescent girls. Kang and colleagues showed a long-term association between social disconnection and memory in older adults, especially when loneliness and isolation happen together. The strongest presentation conclusion is balance. These studies don't prove that every type of connection improves every type of cognition, but instead they show that social environments are meaningfully related to cognitive functioning. Exclusion may temporarily compete with working memory, while long-term disconnection may be tied to fewer cognitive and emotional supports for memory. These are my references. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.